Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Light Tackle Week. This week we're going to be dropping some videos with some awesome start cast, covering everything you need to know about light tackle fishing here in the Chesapeake Bay and the surrounding areas. This will be leading up to our light tackle event here coming up April 13th. So make sure you come by to check that out. And make sure to also check out our website for full details at anglersannapolis.com. Now, today we're here with Eddie from High Octane, and we're going to be talking about Snakehead 101. So I know there's a lot of tips and whatnot that we're going to go over. So obviously you make snakehead lures, you snakehead fish all the time.
All the time, yep.
Catch a whole bunch of dragons out there. So let's start with some of the, I guess essentials about snakehead fishing around the area. And one of them is going to be like, I guess the most asked question is, where do I go and what do I look for? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say early in the spring, the water's still cold, still warming up. So one of my tips is look for those kind of 3 consecutive warm days. So anything that's over 60 degrees for a couple days, especially that third day, can be absolutely killer, like we had a couple weeks ago.
Right.
Where on that third day, people were already catching them on top water. Some on the western shore, it does definitely heat up more on the eastern shore quicker because of the tannic water. You know, everyone knows Blackwater area. It's not a spot burn there, but that would be kind of my one tip for the spring. And then once it heats up, temps in those 60s to 70s, it's on just about everywhere.
Gotcha. And when you're out there, what are like the things you're looking at, like on the water that you want to like cast to? Like, what kind of structure? Is there a certain depth that you're looking at? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll split it up a little bit to eastern shore and western shore. So eastern shore, great time right now, early spring when all the lily pads are just coming up, and some on the western shore too. But with the little stalks are coming up, they're sitting in those stalks, especially in the earlier morning, and the deeper water is actually a little bit warmer. And then once it really warms up, they'll go into the shallows, into the those root balls or any kind of grass they can find. Last summer they were stuck to the grass on the western shore. They really couldn't be found anywhere else other than those grass mats. But early in the season, look for those little lily pads, fields that are just coming up. You can run weedless chatterbaits through there, and they'll be sunning to try to warm up as much as they can.
Do you ever find them in like any kind of hard structure anywhere you go?
Yeah, I do. Sometimes on wood, especially in the early spawn, May, before that that grass or lily pad structure is really coming in. So that's a good place to look for them as well. Okay,
cool. And then once you get to summer and all that grass is coming up and whatnot, is that the only place where you kind of just focus at is like actual vegetation, or do you still hit like open water or anything like that?
Some open water, but mainly the channels or places that are close to grass or lily pad fields. They're not as much in open water. They'll be on the flats sometimes, close to grass, kind of warming up in the early spring. But on the western shore, they were really glued in that grass all summer last summer. So we'll see how it goes this year.
So once we talk about obviously all of this, we're going to talk about, like, I guess, what to throw at them, right? Depending on what kind of structure we're fishing and whatnot. And obviously you make all these great lures. So let's talk about, I guess, the lures that you would choose, like the essential lures, and then talk about like where to use them, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So with High Octane, the majority of the stuff we make is weedless. So you can throw it, like I said, in any of those lily pad fields, rip it out of there, bounce it off any of the stalks, any of the grass. A lot of times they'll be in those root balls on the eastern shore, those kind of bushes you'll see out in the middle, and just throw a weedless chatterbait like these right next to those root balls or along any of the grass, and they'll come out and smash this. One tip, if you haven't used weedless lures before, you do have to wait like half a second to set the hook. You have to kind of feel the weight of the fish before setting the hook, where an open hooks, a lot of times they hook themselves, right?
Right.
But for a weedless lure, a lot of times, especially snakehead, they short strike a lot as well. You really got to make sure that you feel the weight and then set it as hard as you can.
Gotcha. And I know you have spinner baits, like inline spinners and whatnot. and some of these other cool styles here? Is there like a place where you will use one over the other?
Sometimes they're super targeted into the chatterbaits, or the inline spinners here are weedless tridents. I would say have a little bit less of a thump and a little bit more of a buzz through the water. So sometimes they're more keyed in on that, especially if they're a little finicky throughout the day. It's also personal preference. A lot of my buddies, I'm a big chatterbait fan. A lot of my buddies just throw these inline spinners through the whole spring.
Right.
But sometimes, man, I've had days where I'm throwing this all day and it's just not working, and one cast I'll throw this and they hit it.
So. Like you said, more of a finesse style.
It can be a little bit more of a finesse, a little bit less of a thump there. And then the weedless, this is what we call the weedless jig head with underspin. Underspin catches everything.
Oh yeah.
This is probably one of the most underrated lures just out there in general. This is great because it's weedless. Yeah, absolutely. You can throw this anywhere, rip it through the grass, rip it through the wood, whatever. Comes anywhere from 1/8 all the way to 3/8. So
nice. Yeah. And then frogs. I know you have a couple different styles of frogs, like a popping frog, smaller, more finesse style frog, and your regular frog there. So tell us a little bit if you have like a preference on where to use one over the other.
Yeah, definitely. I usually start, this is our Frogzilla. It's a little bit on the larger side to kind of average size. I start with that and then downsize if they're getting a little finicky that day. So sometimes in the spring, I see that they like the bigger baits. They're hungrier, a little more aggressive.
The bigger profile.
Yeah, bigger profiles, even though this isn't huge. But then going into the summertime, they sometimes like more of the bladed baits or the smaller version of the Frogzillas there. And then color-wise, kind of as you can see here too for the subsurface stuff, I love white. And then I go with a bright color. Snakehead are very reaction based and ambush based fish. So, I mean, white's a very natural color to all fish out there. And then anything bright is going to get their attention.
So those will be like your two essential colors.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Can't go wrong with either of those.
Absolutely.
Like you said, for me, white's like kind of like my main snakehead color
always
for most of it. Yeah.
Yep, always on there. And then I have something crazy bright for sure.
Gotcha. And now, I guess one of the last things here is going to be tackle, right? We're talking about, I guess, line size and rods and what you like to use for some of these lures. Or I guess for some of the viewers here is, if you had to use one rod, what will be the best essential, kind of like, easy for someone that's just starting off, wants to use all of these rods? What would you recommend for them to kind of, get?
Absolutely. I would just start with a heavy, heavy rod with I'd just use a 3000, kind of any size you would use for light
Most
tackle
of the
rock
stuff here,
fishing. Yeah. And then really minimum 30-pound braid to 50. I've moved up to 50 to most of my stuff. You don't lose that much castability. It's a lot more durable when you're ripping it through the pads and grass and all that stuff.
And that's essential, right?
Yeah, and I mean you can hook set as hard as you want. You're not going to worry about it,
Right.
Because it's not only the strength of the line, but like the abrasion. You're ripping it through a lot of heavy cover
Right.
a lot of times, so you don't want that to wear down over time.
Yeah, and like you were saying, with that heavy line, you're also a lot of us. Or people that are just getting started don't understand, sometimes you got to cut through that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially on some of those hook sets and whatnot. So, other than that, I will say one last tip you can think of. Like, when you're out there on the water, what's like one last thing you will say, hey, look at this. This is, a area where you can find them, or just one tip that you can give them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would pay attention to your surroundings. Snakehead will give themselves away. They breathe air, so they'll come up and gulp air, or you'll hear this very distinct pop when they're feeding. So hear for that, listen for that, look for that, and if you see that, cast in that direction. I like to cast kind of past it
Right.
and just slowly bring whatever you're throwing by them. And a lot of times they give themselves away. So just
Yeah,
keep
that's a
your
great tip.
eyes and ears out for them.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Eddie, for this seminar. Lots of great information, obviously, for you guys out there targeting snakehead. And remember, guys, there's going to be a sale on the 13th. All these videos are going to be coming out April 6th until the sales day on the 13th. And remember, for details, go to our website at anglersanapolis.com. There's going to be 15% off rods, reels, and combos. And if you bring a functional rod or combo that day, you will receive an extra 10%, which will make it 25% off for your items that day for rods or reels or anything like that. So make sure to check that out. And thank you guys. We'll see you next time.